The silver diplomatic vessel appeared without warning, slipping into Earth's orbit like a needle threading through fabric. At first, the public radar systems showed nothing, but deep within the mountain bunkers of Earth's hidden defense network, Admiral James watched the real readings with a carefully neutral expression. "They're here earlier than we expected," he said, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The massive underground command center hummed with quiet activity as operators maintained their positions, tracking the alien ship's every move. The vessel was small by assembly standards, only about the size of a large aircraft carrier. Its sleek hull gleamed under Earth's sun, displaying the markings of the Galactic Assembly, the powerful federation of 3 galaxies that humanity had been secretly watching for decades. Earth's public response was exactly what the Assembly expected from a primitive civilization. News channels blazed with excited headlines about humanity's first contact. Social media exploded with theories and speculation. The world's governments made a show of scrambling to establish a unified response. Behind this carefully orchestrated chaos, Admiral James and his team waited. They had rehearsed this moment for years. The Assembly's diplomatic party landed in a designated area outside the United Nations headquarters in New York. Their representatives emerged from their ship with the practiced grace of species who had mastered interstellar travel centuries ago. Ambassador Stone, their lead diplomat, stood nearly 7 feet tall with metallic-looking skin that shifted colors slightly as he moved. "We come in peace," Ambassador Stone announced in perfect English, his translation device making his words flow smoothly. "The Galactic Assembly extends its greetings to Earth." The gathered human diplomats responded with appropriate awe and gratitude, playing their parts perfectly. News cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the historic meeting to billions of watching humans. Then came the words Admiral James had been waiting for. "We have observed your civilization for some time." Ambassador Stone continued, his tone taking on a subtle note of condescension. "While your progress is admirable for your level of development, we believe you could benefit greatly from our guidance. The Assembly offers Earth a position as a protectorate species." In the command center, Admiral James allowed himself a small smile. On one of the screens, he watched the Assembly's ship floating in orbit. Their scans were thorough but primitive by human standards. They saw exactly what Earth wanted them to see. "Of course, there will be some restrictions," Ambassador Stone explained to the assembled human leaders. "Your current level of technology requires careful oversight. All space exploration beyond your moon will need Assembly approval. Any technological developments must be reviewed by Assembly scientists. This is for your own protection, you understand." The human diplomats nodded, some making a show of looking relieved at this generous offer of protection. In his bunker, Admiral James received a message from the hidden shipyards in the dark matter pockets throughout the solar system. The Dreadnought fleet was ready, as it had been for years. Nearly 300 ships, each one large enough to dwarf the Assembly's diplomatic vessel, waited in their dimensional pockets, invisible to the Assembly's scanning technology. "We'll need to establish a trade agreement," Ambassador Stone continued. "The Assembly has identified several resources on Earth that would be valuable. In exchange, we can offer limited access to some of our simpler technologies." The human diplomats continued their act of grateful acceptance, while deep in their secure facilities, Earth's real leadership watched and waited. They had spent decades preparing for this moment, building their forces in secret, hidden behind the perfect mask of an emerging civilization. As the day drew to a close, the Assembly representatives returned to their ship, satisfied with their diplomatic victory. They had successfully established their dominance over another primitive species, or so they thought. In his command center, Admiral James opened a secure channel to Earth's hidden council. "The Assembly has made their move," he reported. "They see exactly what we want them to see. How long should we maintain this charade?" "As long as necessary," came the reply. "Let them think us primitive. Let them underestimate us. When the time comes, they'll learn that humanity's greatest strength has always been patience." Outside, the assembly's diplomatic vessel gleamed in Earth's orbit, its crew completely unaware that they were surrounded by humanity's hidden fleet, waiting in the dark matter pockets between dimensions. The game had begun, and only humanity knew the true rules. 50 years earlier, in a hidden research facility deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Dr. Miller stared at her computer screen with wide eyes. Her hand shook as she rechecked the data for the 100th time. "This can't be right," she whispered, but the numbers didn't lie. Her team had just discovered something impossible, a way to detect and manipulate dark matter. The young James, then just a military observer for the project, stood behind her. "What exactly are we looking at, Doctor?" "A pocket," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "A space between spaces. Dark matter doesn't just exist. It creates hidden areas in our universe, and we can open them." That discovery changed everything. Within months, the world's governments secretly united under a single goal: to hide humanity's greatest achievements from watching eyes. They had detected the assembly's scout ships years ago, watching Earth from the edges of the solar system. Now, humanity had a way to develop in secret. Project Shadowforge began. Hidden shipyards were built inside dark matter pockets throughout the solar system. To the outside world, humans were still struggling with basic rocket technology. But in these invisible spaces, they built wonders. In the present day, Technical Officer Blake walked through one of these shipyards with Admiral James. Through the massive viewing window, they watched workers in advanced spacesuits putting final touches on the newest Dreadnought. "The assembly still has no idea," Blake said, checking his tablet. "Their scans show nothing but empty space here." Admiral James nodded. The ship they were looking at was larger than most cities, a massive warship powered by dark matter itself. Its black hull seemed to swallow light, covered in weapons that could tear apart small moons. "How many do we have now?" James asked, though he knew the answer. 300 dreadnoughts, fully crewed and ready," Blake replied. "Plus the support fleet. We could fight off the combined forces of all 3 galaxies if we needed to." James remembered the day they decided to hide their power. Their long-range scanners had picked up assembly warships destroying a young civilization that had developed too quickly for their comfort. The assembly preferred to find races early, to guide their development in ways that kept them weak and dependent. "Show me the latest intel," James ordered. Blake brought up a holographic display. It showed assembly ships throughout the 3 galaxies, many of them warships disguised as diplomatic vessels. They all followed the same pattern: find developing worlds, offer protection, then slowly drain them of resources. "They think they're being clever," Blake said. "Their ships are carrying enough weapons to destroy Earth 10 times over." James smiled grimly. "And our smallest support ship could handle their entire diplomatic fleet." They walked through more of the shipyard, passing by rooms where scientists worked on even newer technologies. Human innovation had exploded once they had a safe space to develop. Without the assembly's restrictions, they had achieved things that would seem like magic to their would-be overlords. "The public is getting restless," Blake noted. "They're worried about accepting the assembly's terms." "They should be," James replied. "It's all part of the plan. Let the people's genuine concern show. It makes our act more convincing." They stopped at another window, this one showing the dark matter drives being installed in a new ship. The massive engines could fold space itself, making their ships faster than anything the assembly had ever seen. "Tell me again why we wait," Blake said quietly. "We could reveal ourselves now. Show them our true strength." James shook his head. "Patience. We need to understand their full intentions first. And," he paused, looking at the massive fleet hidden in the darkness, "we need to be absolutely certain they can't counter our technology. When we reveal ourselves, it must be decisive." In the distance, the newest Dreadnought's engines began to power up, its dark matter core humming with enough energy to light up a solar system. Soon, the assembly would learn that they weren't the ones in control. They would learn that their primitive humans had surpassed them long ago. But for now, humanity waited in the shadows they had mastered, watching and preparing for the perfect moment to emerge. Commander Reed stood at the spaceport's observation deck, watching the assembly traders unload their goods. Their massive cargo ships took up most of the landing area, while Earth's smaller vessels were pushed to the side like toys. His fists clenched as he watched another shipment of approved technology being offloaded. "Primitive garbage," he muttered. The assembly was sending Earth outdated equipment that humanity had secretly surpassed decades ago. But they had to pretend these simple machines were amazing gifts. An assembly merchant approached a group of human businessmen nearby. The alien was tall and wore expensive-looking clothes that changed color in the sunlight. "Now, for only 60% of your yearly titanium production, we can offer you this wonderful food replicator." Reed knew the truth. That wonderful replicator was something Earth could build in their sleep, but the assembly's trade rules forced them to buy it at huge prices. His communicator buzzed. "Commander, you need to see this," said the voice of his assistant. "They're at the Kuiper Belt again." In his private office, Reed watched the secret feeds from Earth's hidden sensors. Assembly mining ships were helping themselves to the resources in the Kuiper Belt, Earth's territory. They didn't even bother asking permission anymore. "Send the usual protest," Reed ordered, knowing it would do no good. The assembly would just remind Earth that primitive species needed guidance in managing their resources. Later that day, Reed attended an emergency meeting in the underground command center. The room was filled with Earth's real leaders, not the puppet government that dealt with the assembly. "They're getting worse," Admiral James said, showing images on the main screen. "Assembly ships are marking human colonies for relocation. They say the spaces are needed for their own expansion." The images showed assembly surveyors placing markers around human settlements on Mars and several asteroid bases. These were simple colonies on the surface, hiding the true cities humanity had built in dark matter pockets nearby. "Look at this," Technical Officer Blake added, bringing up a trade report. "They're charging us 10 times the normal rate for basic medical supplies. Supplies we could make better versions of in our sleep." The assembly's arrogance was growing. They treated Earth like a backwards planet full of simple people who needed to be controlled. Every day brought new rules, new restrictions, and new demands. "There's more," Reed said, sharing his own report. "They're starting to push into the asteroid belt. Their miners don't even pretend to ask permission anymore. They just take what they want." The room grew quiet as a new message appeared on the main screen. The assembly had just declared that Earth needed to reduce its space presence even further. Any human ships wanting to travel beyond the moon would need assembly escorts. For their own safety, of course. "They think we're children," James said, his voice hard. "They think we need their permission to move in our own solar system." Reed watched as more assembly cargo ships landed at the spaceport outside. Through the window, he could see their crews strutting around like they owned the place. In a way, they did, or thought they did. "How much longer?" Reed asked. "How much longer do we have to pretend?" Admiral James looked at the latest intelligence reports. Assembly ships were spreading through the solar system, setting up bases and mining operations wherever they wanted. Their diplomatic vessels, actually disguised warships, were getting bolder, pushing humans around with growing confidence. "Soon," James replied. "Very soon. They're showing their true colors now. Every insult, every demand, every act of disrespect, we're recording it all. When we reveal ourselves, the galaxy will understand why." In orbit, hidden in their dark matter pockets, Earth's mighty fleet waited. The Dreadnought's crews trained in secret, their weapons ready, their engines humming with power the assembly couldn't even imagine. The assembly thought they were dealing with simple, primitive humans who needed their guidance. Soon, they would learn just how wrong they were. But for now, humanity endured the insults, recorded the offenses, and waited for the perfect moment to show their true strength. 20 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, In a base hidden under the Mariana Trench, Earth's true leaders gathered for the most important meeting in human history. The underwater command center hummed with activity as data streams flowed across massive screens, showing the position of every assembly ship in the solar system. Admiral James stood at the head of the long table, looking at the faces of men and women who had kept humanity's greatest secret for decades. "It's time," he said simply. The room grew quiet. They all knew what those words meant. Technical Officer Blake stepped forward, activating a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed hundreds of green dots scattered throughout the solar system, Earth's hidden fleet in their dark matter pockets. "All 300 dreadnoughts are ready," Blake reported, "plus 1,000 support ships. Every crew is at full strength. They've trained for years in secret for this moment." "Show me the assembly's positions," James ordered. The display changed, now showing red dots representing assembly ships. They were everywhere. Mining vessels stripping resources from the asteroid belt, patrol ships watching Earth's colonies, and their massive diplomatic ships hovering over major cities. "They're getting comfortable," Commander Reed noted. "Their ships don't even try to hide their weapons anymore. They think we're too primitive to notice." "Perfect," James said. "The more overconfident they are, the better this will work." Blake brought up another display showing the dark matter emergence protocols. These were the commands that would bring Earth's fleet out of hiding all at once. "We've tested the system 100 times. When we give the signal, every ship will appear simultaneously. The assembly won't have time to react." The base's chief scientist, Dr. Wilson, spoke up next. "Remember, they have no defense against our technology. Their shields are useless against dark matter weapons. Their sensors can't detect our ships. Even their fastest vessels can't match our speed." James nodded, then turned to the massive screen showing Earth's surface. Assembly diplomats were gathering in New York for a major conference. They planned to announce new protection measures for humanity, really just more ways to control Earth. "The conference is in 3 days," James said. "That's when we reveal ourselves. Right when they're about to announce their new restrictions. Right when their arrogance is at its peak." The room erupted in activity as final preparations began. In hidden shipyards throughout the solar system, crews made last checks on their mighty vessels. Each dreadnought was a masterpiece of human engineering, carrying weapons that could reduce planets to dust. "Send the code to all ship captains," James ordered. "Operation Dawn begins in 72 hours. Deep in their dark matter pockets, ship captains receive their orders. Captain Walker of the flagship Dreadnought, Humanity's Dawn, smiled as she read the message. Her crew had waited years for this. "Status report," she called out to her bridge crew. "All weapons charged and ready," her weapons officer replied. "Dark matter cannons at full power." "Engines primed," added the engineer. "We can emerge from the pocket dimension in less than a second." Walker looked at her mighty ship through the internal cameras. The Dreadnought was huge, its black hull stretching for miles. Assembly ships would look like toys next to it. Back in the underwater base, James made final checks on the emergence protocol. Everything had to be perfect. When Earth's fleet appeared, it would be the biggest shock in assembly history. "Remember," he told his staff, "when we emerge, hold position only. No aggressive moves unless they fire first. We want the galaxy to see who the real aggressors are." The countdown began. In 3 days, the assembly would learn that their primitive humans had been hiding the most powerful fleet in known space. In 3 days, the balance of power would shift forever. All across the solar system, in hidden pockets of dark matter, humanity's ships waited for the signal. The time for hiding was almost over. The time for showing their true strength was about to begin. The Assembly's grand conference hall, built on their massive space station orbiting Earth, was filled with alien diplomats from 3 galaxies. Ambassador Stone stood at the main podium, looking down at the gathered representatives with a satisfied smile. "And now," he announced, "we will begin the next phase of Earth's protection program." In the audience, human diplomats sat quietly, playing their assigned roles as simple primitives who needed guidance. But in their earpieces, they heard a single word from Admiral James: begin. Captain Walker stood on the bridge of the Dreadnought, humanity's dawn, hidden safely in its dark matter pocket. "All ships report ready," she announced. "Emergence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The space around Earth changed forever. First came the Dreadnoughts, 300 massive black ships, each one bigger than the Assembly's space station, appeared out of nowhere. Their huge forms blocked out the stars, their dark matter engines glowing with impossible power. Around them, 1,000 smaller ships emerged, forming perfect battle formations. In the conference hall, every screen and window showed the same thing: humanity's hidden fleet revealing itself. Ambassador Stone stopped mid-sentence, his color-shifting skin turning pale with shock. "Impossible," he whispered. Captain Walker's voice boomed through every speaker in the station, transmitted by technology far beyond the Assembly's understanding. "This is Captain Walker of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your conference is now under our protection." The Assembly diplomats stared in horror at the screens. Each dreadnought was a city-sized weapon of war, bristling with cannons that could tear apart moons. The smallest human ship was larger than the Assembly's biggest battlecruiser. What is this?" Ambassador Stone demanded, his diplomatic calm cracking. Admiral James walked into the conference hall, wearing his full military uniform for the first time in public. "This, Ambassador, is humanity's true face." On every screen, more ships appeared. The dark matter pockets that had hidden Earth's fleet now opened everywhere, revealing humanity's real space presence. Hidden shipyards, defense platforms, and research stations emerged throughout the solar system. "How?" an Assembly military advisor asked, his voice shaking. "Our scans showed nothing." "Your scans showed what we wanted them to show," James replied calmly. "We discovered dark matter technology 50 years ago. We've been watching you, learning about you, building our strength, all while you thought we were simple primitives who needed your guidance." Outside, the dreadnoughts moved with impossible grace for their size. Their dark hulls seemed to swallow light itself, their weapons ready but not aimed at any Assembly ships. They didn't need to make threats. Their mere presence was enough. "Humanity's dawn, ready for commands," Walker reported, her massive flagship taking position directly above the space station. The Assembly diplomats looked up through the station's windows at the huge ship above them. Many of them had supervised the conquest of other civilizations. Now, for the first time, they felt what it was like to be the weaker species. "We have terms," James announced to the silent hall. "First, Earth and its colonies will be recognized as a fully independent power. Second, all Assembly mining operations in our solar system will cease immediately. Third," he smiled slightly, "you will apologize for calling us primitive." Through the windows, more ships emerged every minute. Earth's fleet was larger than anything the Assembly had ever seen. Their sensors couldn't even understand the technology they were looking at. "The time for hiding is over," James declared. "You thought you were helping simple primitives. Instead, you were dealing with humanity at perhaps 1% of its true strength. Now, shall we discuss a new relationship between equals?" In orbit above Earth, hundreds of dreadnoughts held position, their dark matter engines humming with power that the Assembly had never dreamed possible. The game of pretending to be primitive was over. Now, the real negotiations could begin. The Assembly's Emergency Council chamber was very different from just a few hours ago. Gone was the casual arrogance of the alien diplomats. Now they sat nervously, watching Earth's representatives with new respect. The massive form of humanity's dawn was visible through the window behind Admiral James, a constant reminder of humanity's power. "Let's review the evidence," James said, activating a holographic display in the center of the room. "Our sensors recorded everything over the past 5 years." The display showed Assembly ships stripping resources from Earth's territories. It showed their warships disguised as diplomatic vessels. It showed their traders cheating human merchants with outdated technology. Ambassador Stone shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We were only trying to guide your development," he said weakly. "By stealing our resources?" Commander Reed asked. He played another recording showing assembly miners taking metals from the asteroid belt without permission. "By treating us like children." The Assembly's military advisor, General Bright, studied the detailed scans of Earth's fleet with growing concern. "Your ships, they're beyond anything we've ever seen." "The power readings alone." "Yes," Technical Officer Blake confirmed. "Each Dreadnought carries enough firepower to defeat your entire local fleet. But we chose not to fight. We chose to wait and watch." James played more recordings. They showed assembly ships destroying other young civilizations that had developed too quickly. The alien diplomats looked away, unable to deny their actions. "We had good reasons to hide our strength," James continued. "You don't have a good history with species that develop too fast." Captain Walker's voice came through the communication system. "Admiral, our ships have secured all assembly mining operations in the solar system. Their crews are ready for evacuation." The Assembly Council members looked at each other in defeat. Their mighty federation, which controlled 3 galaxies, had been completely outmaneuvered by a species they thought was primitive. "What are your demands?" Ambassador Stone asked quietly. James laid out a data pad on the table. "First, Earth will be recognized as a fully independent power, equal to the Assembly in all matters. Second, all stolen resources will be returned with interest. Third," he showed them images of other developing civilizations the Assembly was currently guiding. "Third, your practice of forcing protection on younger species ends today. From now on, any civilization you contact must be given true choice in their development." General Bright objected. "But some species develop dangerous technologies too quickly. They need control." "Like we did," James interrupted. "We developed our technology in secret because we saw how you treated others. We hid our strength because we saw you destroy those who showed their power too soon." The display changed to show Earth's dark matter technology. The Assembly scientists in the room leaned forward with obvious interest. "We're willing to share some of our advances," Blake offered. "But only if you prove you can be trusted, only if you change how you treat other species." Ambassador Stone looked through the window at the massive fleet surrounding the station. Each human ship was a masterpiece of technology, representing power his people couldn't match. "The Assembly Council will need to vote," he said carefully. "Of course," James agreed. "Take all the time you need. Our fleet will maintain its current position until you decide." The message was clear. The Assembly could accept Earth's terms, or they could try to fight the most powerful fleet they had ever encountered. One by one, the Assembly Council members looked at the evidence, studied the fleet outside, and faced the truth. They had badly underestimated humanity. Their choice now was simple: adapt to a new reality or face the consequences. "Perhaps," Ambassador Stone said slowly, "it's time for the Assembly to change its ways. Time to learn from the species we thought were primitive." James nodded, hiding a small smile. The real victory wasn't showing Earth's power. It was using that power to create positive change throughout the galaxies. 6 months after humanity's reveal of their true power, Earth's solar system looked very different. The massive form of humanity's dawn patrolled openly near Mars, its dark hull gleaming under the distant sun. Other dreadnoughts moved freely through space, no longer hidden in dark matter pockets. Admiral James stood in the New Earth Embassy on the Assembly's capital world, looking out at the alien city through the huge windows. Behind him, Commander Reed entered with the latest reports. "The last Assembly mining ship left our system yesterday," Reed announced. "They're actually following the new treaties." James nodded. Fear was a powerful motivator, but he hoped it wouldn't always be needed. "And the other developing worlds?" Reed smiled. "The Assembly is keeping their word there too. 3 young civilizations have already refused their protection program. The Assembly actually respected their choice. On the streets below, Aliens from 3 galaxies walked past the embassy, often stopping to stare at the building with a mixture of fear and respect. Nobody called humans primitive anymore. Technical Officer Blake joined them, carrying his datapad. "The technology exchange is going well," he reported. "We're sharing our older advances, nothing too critical, and the assembly is amazed even by those." "And what we're keeping secret?" James asked. "Safe," Blake assured him. "They still have no idea about our newest ships or weapons. The assembly thinks they've seen all our technology. They don't know we're still developing more every day." In orbit above the capital world, Captain Walker commanded her Dreadnought with pride. The mighty ship was a symbol now, a reminder that the seemingly weak could be incredibly strong. Other ships of the assembly's fleet kept their distance, still in awe of human technology. Another trade fleet requesting permission to enter Earth's space, Walker reported through the comm system, following all the new protocols perfectly. James smiled. The assembly had learned to show respect. Their ships now asked permission before entering human territory. Their traders offered fair prices. Their diplomats spoke to humans as equals. "Show me the numbers for the other protected worlds," James ordered. Blake brought up a new display. Dozens of young civilizations that the assembly had once controlled were now developing freely. Some chose to remain allied with the assembly, but as partners, not servants. Others chose complete independence. "We've changed the balance of 3 galaxies," Reed said quietly. "Not with war, but with patience and wisdom." Through the window, they watched an assembly warship pass by. 6 months ago, that ship's crew would have looked down on humans as primitives. Now they carefully maintained their distance, treating the Earth Embassy with careful respect. "What about the dark matter research?" James asked. "Still our secret," Blake confirmed. "We're helping other young worlds develop their own technology, but always watching to make sure they don't become like the old assembly." The door opened, and Ambassador Stone entered. The alien diplomat had changed in the past months. Gone was his arrogance, replaced by genuine respect. "The Assembly Council is ready for today's meeting," he announced. "They're eager to discuss opening new trade routes through human space." James nodded. "Tell them we'll be there shortly." After Stone left, James turned to his team. "Remember, we show strength without arrogance. We guide without controlling. We help without demanding submission. That's what makes us different from what the assembly used to be." On screens around the room, they could see Earth's fleet maintaining peace throughout nearby space. The ships were no longer hidden, but they weren't threatening either. They were a promise that the strong could protect the weak without controlling them. "Launch the new education program," James ordered. "Let's show these galaxies that sharing knowledge is better than hoarding it, that helping others grow makes everyone stronger." As the sun set on the alien capital, Earth's influence continued to spread, not through force or fear, but through wisdom and patience. The species that had once been called primitive had become teachers, showing 3 galaxies a better way forward. The assembly had learned an important lesson. Never judge a civilization by its appearance, because sometimes the most powerful species is the one wise enough to hide its strength until the right moment.